Sit back, relax, and enjoy listening as RK lifted his head to see what was happening. And there she was, SV, walking down the aisle, holding her mother's hand. In that moment, everything else faded away. As SV stepped closer, RK found himself staring at her, utterly entranced. All his confusion, all his questions evaporated as he watched her glide toward him. His heart raced, pounding against his chest as if trying to break free. He felt as though he were in a dream, with everything around him slipping into darkness. Every step SV took toward him felt monumental, echoing with unspoken words and unresolved tension. She was adorned in white, the embodiment of beauty, yet her demeanor was icy, betraying the storm brewing within her. RK felt a sense of dread mingling with awe as he realized the magnitude of what was happening. This wasn't just a wedding. This was a collision of their past, present, and future. On the other hand, SV was lost in her own world. Her eyes were straight ahead, but she wasn't truly seeing what was going on. Past incidents played in her head like a movie. Suddenly, her mother's voice echoed through her ears, snapping her back to reality. She found herself standing in front of RK, with her mother in between them. Her mother, smiling with watery eyes, said softly, "RK, I'm giving you my everything because I know you will take care of her, probably more than I ever could, my son." A tear of happiness slipped from her eyes. "Auntie," RK began, trying to say something, but he was interrupted by SV's mom as she continued, "I'm so happy, son. Thank you so much for everything. You don't know what it means to me for you to say yes to this. What this marriage means to me." She nearly choked on her words, her voice breaking as she teared up. Moved, RK hugged her to comfort her, gently wiping away her tears, and said with a soft smile, "If you're happy, why are you crying, Auntie?" In a light-hearted tone, SV's mother chuckled. "Because you're still calling me Auntie." RK smiled nervously, and after thinking for some time, he said, "Actually, Aunt," he was about to say Auntie again, but quickly realized his mistake and said, Sorry, Mom." Both of them smiled warmly, but SV, hearing all this and seeing RK smile, felt her anger boiling inside. The hatred in her eyes for him was unmistakable. The sight of him smiling made her blood boil, so much that she wanted to lash out, say something, or express her rage. But just as she was about to, her mother's hand gently squeezed hers, pulling her focus toward her. SV's anger began to fade, replaced by a fleeting sense of happiness as she saw her mother smiling for the first time in ages. A smile that reminded her of the sole reason she was going through with this marriage. It was all for her mother's happiness, the one person in the world whom she cherished above all else. SV had always hated men and loathed the idea of marriage. But seeing her mother so joyful, she felt a rare warmth spread through her, even if just for a moment. Her mother, looking at both SV and RK, said, "My perfect fit," and hugged them both. SV, forgetting her anger for a brief moment, hugged her mother. But as soon as her mother let go and held SV's hand, trying to give it to RK, her expression changed again. SV's eyes locked onto RK's, piercing into him with a hatred so intense it felt like she could kill him with a single glance. RK, caught up in his conversation with her mother, didn't notice at first. But then, as if something pulled his gaze, he turned to find SV staring straight at him with pure hatred. The intensity of her glare was unmistakable, unsettling him in a way he couldn't explain. He could clearly see the hatred in her eyes, her boiling anger affecting him more deeply than ever before. Their eyes met for the first time during the wedding, and for a brief moment, they were both lost in the tension between them. Suddenly, RK's sister playfully slapped him on the shoulder, teasing, "Brother, everyone is watching!" RK snapped out of it, and so did SV. As his mother urged him, RK slowly extended his hand. SV's mother gently placed SV's hand into his, covering both of their hands with hers, and said with a smile, "God bless you both. I know you were born for each other. Don't ever leave each other's side." SV watched all this in disbelief. As soon as her mother placed her hand in RK's and their skin touched, a wave of shock and disbelief coursed through her. It reminded her of their first meeting, the first time RK had touched her, when he had grabbed her hand to stop her from beating that reporter. That moment had changed everything. If RK hadn't dared to hold her hand that day, none of this would have happened. SV despised all men. She never even allowed any of them to look at her, let alone come close. The thought of anyone daring to touch her was beyond unthinkable. But RK had done just that. He had grabbed her hand. From that moment, SV swore she would make him pay, to teach him a lesson he would never forget. She was determined to make the man who dared to touch her live a life filled with regret. Her mind raced with anger, thinking of how she had eliminated every obstacle in her way, yet RK had dared to touch her to stop her. On the other hand, as soon as RK's hand made contact with SV's cold skin, he experienced an unexpected sense of calm wash over him. It was as if the chaotic thoughts swirling in his mind suddenly vanished. He couldn't quite grasp this feeling, but it felt significant, like he had been entrusted with something incredibly valuable, something he instinctively wanted to protect at all costs. Despite the intense hatred he had seen in her eyes moments earlier, that anger seemed to dissipate in that brief connection. In that instant, he found himself momentarily forgetting that this was the same woman who had turned his life into a living hell. Instead, he was captivated by the weight of her presence, an unexpected reminder of the complexity of their relationship.